Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? As usual, I'm doing absolutely fabulous, and I hope you guys are keeping lovely and warm wherever you are, because it's getting a lot colder, and we all need those lovely cups of hot chocolate. But whatever you're drinking, let me know about it. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, the year was 1972, a beautiful tranquil day in a green leafy neighbourhood outside Spokane, Washington. It was early spring, and the flower beds were bursting with colourful blooms in reds, pinks, purples, blues, yellows, whites, a kaleidoscope of visually enticing colours, while the viridescent green manicured lawns, hedges, climbing shrubs had been manicured to perfection by the local residents. The recent rainfall filling the air with an intoxicating dewy freshness, where the smell of sweet mown grass permeated the crisp, vibrant morning with a heady, pleasing infusion. The crab-apple trees and flowering plums, curvaceous boughs, were graciously caressed with the ethereal, pretty spring blossoms, while the golden sunshine smiled down upon the earth with a generous, hugging warmth that enveloped you in the quintessential, cheerful essence of a perfect spring day. A couple of jubilant children were riding their bicycles down the long ribbon of asphalt, framed on either side by large, verdant lawns with long lines of statuesque, mature oak trees. A young woman appeared to be walking her little Scotty terrier down the street, who was sniffing everything in sight with a rambunctious enthusiasm, while his tail was wagging profusely. It was the quintessential idyllic picture of urban bliss, as urban meets country, as further down the road the neighbourhood was flanked by thriving prodigious wood groves full of fabulous outdoor hiking trails filled with clusters of ponderosa pines and Douglas firs, their towering pyramid shapes, long slender trunks, and bobbing needled boughs penciling up into the cobalt blue sky like graceful verdant jewels. Zinnia Adams instinctively sensed that something wasn't quite right. She had returned to her white truck after visiting the residence at number 42. Something about her interaction with the couple, the parents of two young kids, was decidedly odd. Her antennae were wagging like a dog's exuberant tail, a soft nudge, alerting her senses to pay attention. Should she be concerned? Probably not. After all, she was an estate agent with a job that needed doing. These people wanted to sell their property. But the question looming in the back of her mind like a bright red warning flag was why? The slightly standoff, not over-friendly couple had made idle chit-chat with her, giving each other furtive, sneaky sideway glances when they thought she wasn't looking, but she'd seen it all. They had been quite evasive when answering her questions, as if privy to a deep, dark secret that they didn't want to share. They had dutifully shown her around the beautiful, very elegant, stylish home, of which no expense had been spared. An architect's creation where the classic old-world charm of Georgian influences from the original house was married seamlessly with more modern, sophisticated, open-plan living at its finest. All the alterations were very new, elaborate, state-of-the-art, that had been created for them at a vast expense, and, of course, using creative ingenuity, a unique home in its own right, which had clearly been a labour of love, where the couple had put their soul and heart into this property, along with their hopes, dreams, and aspirations. The house positively reeked individuality and savoir-faire. It was without doubt one of the most stunning, breathtakingly beautiful houses in the neighbourhood. They had extended the property so seamlessly, as if all the additions were part of the original design. No easy feat by any stretch of the imagination. They'd even added a designer kitchen to the property that would make Gordon Ramsay quite literally drool. No one planning to sell their property for an excellent price would go out of a limb to invest in the most extravagant fixtures, fittings, and appliances in order to align someone else's nest with such finery. I mean, why would a magpie put hundreds of its glittering nuggets into a blue martin's nest for the blue martin to enjoy? That would be incredulous. If you were investing in your home for the purposes of selling, you would settle for something classy, classic, but affordable, but you wouldn't spend a fortune when it wasn't necessary. That was not a savvy or astute business decision to make. Zinnia sat in her car, tapping her fingers awkwardly on the steering wheel, while she put on the radio to listen to some relaxing music, to settle the rising level of angst that she was beginning to feel. She couldn't shake off her sharpened instincts that were stabbing her gently like a finger in the gut, whispering into her mind like a gentle, all-knowing wind, that something was distinctly off. She tried to review her meeting with the couple in her head, again gauging the reactions from her clients like an inconspicuous fly on the wall, assessing and meditating on all the couple's clandestine, covert, underhanded gestures, mannerisms and movements, what they said, and of course more notably what they did not say, for very often in her experience the things left unsaid were the most revelatory of all. "Why are you selling?" she'd asked. "I mean, your house is so beautiful. I can see you've put your heart and soul into the property, invested a lot of your money in this prestigious project. You've only just completed the renovations for your property. Why on earth would you sell?" That was when she had noticed the circumspect, furtive glances between the woman and her husband. The woman trembled awkwardly, avoiding her gaze. It was clear that her evasive, slinky, shady eyes held in their depths a masked secret that she was not willing to unveil. I just think it would be nice to have a change," she had said. The answer was so vague, indeterminate, non-committal, words that weren't solid in their foundations, but crumbled in your hands like broken pieces of pottery. "But I don't understand," Zinnia had said. "I mean, you're in a prime location here, close to the woods, open hiking trails, not to mention schools and shopping facilities. Why on earth would you want to leave this place?" "Because we do." The father had jumped into the conversation like a leaping frog, darting over the water lilies to get to his buzzing quarry before anybody else did. It was as if he was mindfully afraid his wife's lips might lead her astray and let the cat out of the bag. He was behaving like a man who was determined to shroud their secret with an obscure blanket in the desperate hope that it would remain unobserved. But in Zinnia's mind, he was not fooling anyone except himself, for his defensive, guarded reactions had almost certainly given him away. He was definitely hiding something. "Yes, but that kitchen of yours. I mean, it's the most exquisite kitchen I've ever seen. I mean, that kitchen is built for a professional." "My wife is a fabulous cordon bleu cook," said the man proudly, putting his arms around his wife protectively in a defensive stance, while the wife gave him a warning look, as if to say, "You've said too much. Watch your words." "I know. It's a lovely kitchen," she said, but we still want to sell," said the man, interrupting his wife. "Well, your house is ready to put on the market as ASAP. We'll be able to organise an open day this weekend if you like. There's nothing you need to do to attract these buyers. You'll have people fighting over this place at, of course, the right price." "Good. Well, do it," said the man, whose name was Christopher Hoggins. "We'd like a quick sale, and the faster the better." Zinnia sat back in her white truck, studying the beautiful street, the verdant lawns, the area flanked by woodland trees. She wondered why on earth this young couple would sell. This was the perfect spot for many a young couple to raise their kids. "They're keeping something from me. I know they are, and I want to find out exactly what it is." Zinnia climbed out of her truck with a steely grit and determination, determined to find answers. She knew she ran the risk of the owner refusing to use their agency to sell their property, and that would go down with her boss, Christina Macmillan, with about as much popularity as a lead balloon. She could already see her boss laying into her hard. "If they want to sell, Zinnia, it's their business. Who are we to poke our noses in their affairs? It's more business for us. Why on earth should we look a gift horse in the mouth? Tell me that." Unlike a lot of agents, Zinnia was hardwired with a code of ethics. Perhaps it was something to do with being a pastor's daughter, but she had very clear, distinct views about what was wrong and what was right. She didn't want to sell a house if she knew there was something intrinsically wrong with it. That wouldn't be right, nor would it be fair to any future owners. She would never want to guilefully deceive or manipulate someone into buying a property based on a fat commission check glittering in her future. Any potential buyers to their property needed to know what they were ploughing their hard-earned money into, much like you need to know that adding a red T-shirt to your white laundry has the potential to turn it bright pink. No one in their right mind would sell a house like this unless they were leaving the country, moving out of state, or unless they had to based on a financial necessity. Maybe the couple had spent too much, were up to their ears in debt. But then why would they not have told her as much, under the parasol of client confidentiality? That occasionally happened on her watch, people who had overextended themselves financially. But she did presume that not to be the case in this unlikely scenario. The signs would be clear to see. The young woman herself was wearing a dress she'd seen in the window at one of the illustrious boutiques in town only the other day. She had personally shuddered with horror at the outrageous over-the-top price tag when she'd gleaned the price. No one would buy high-end clothing like this if they were counting pennies, would they? So something was seriously off. It was like a whiff in the air that she couldn't identify, but she was onto it like a bloodhound. She wouldn't be happy until she could distinguish its source. She made the swift journey back to the gleaming red front door, hampered only by the click-clock of her inappropriate high-heeled sandals that she wished to God she wasn't wearing. They slowed down her approach as she tottered up the sandstone tiles that led to the front door. She admired the 2 large pots of hanging petunias and lobelia that framed the entrance, along with a big front doormat with a sign "Welcome" embossed in gold. She peered through the vertical window superbly fitted with its stained-glass designs of blue irises, and banged boldly on the horseshoe knocker while ringing the doorbell. The intercom burst out into the familiar kids' tune, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." She intuitively perceived that the friendly couple would possibly not be best pleased to see her again, since she'd only left moments before. Now she was back like a nasty mosquito that wouldn't leave you alone, that they secretly probably wished they could swat. Christopher Hoggins opened the door, his face registering surprise to see Zinnia standing there again. She could see his jaw stiffen, his hazel eyes tighten and squint. There was a taut, rigid tension that swept through his body as he pulled his chest erect from its previous slouch position in a protective stance, to give the impression that he was bigger than he actually was, which animals tend to do when facing a predator to appear more intimidating in the wild. Was he seeing her in this light, she secretly wondered? It seemed more than likely. "May I come in?" she asked. "It'll only be for a moment." Christopher shrugged his shoulders in a nonchalant way, but the concern in his eyes was not easily disguised. "Be my guest," he said as he opened the door and led Zinnia directly into the kitchen, where his wife was bustling away, stirring at a red concoction vigorously on the gas range that looked suspiciously like tomato sauce. "That smells very good," she said. "What are you making? I think I can smell basil, garlic, oregano, tomatoes. Is it some kind of sauce?" "That's right. I'm making a tomato base for a pizza," said the woman, wiping her hands on her apron and joining her husband's side. A worried expression developed on her face. "My kids, they love pizza. It's their absolute favourite food. Obviously, as a mum, I try to make it healthy for them. I never buy those awful pizza sauces in the shop. You know, the secret to a good pizza's a good sauce, a homemade one, along with a delicious crispy base." "Is everything all right?" she asked. Why are you back so quickly? Is there a problem with anything we discussed? Have we overlooked something?" "I was hoping you could answer that question for me yourself." "Look, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to say it as it is. I don't buy your story about why you want to sell. It makes absolutely no sense to me. I know you're holding back something. I need to know what it is if I'm going to be your agent. Is your house haunted? Have you been experiencing supernatural phenomena since your alterations? It does happen. This wouldn't be the first time on my watch. But so as you know, any potential buyers need to know if your house is haunted." At that, Christopher Hoggins burst out laughing. "Haunted? No, I can assure you it's not haunted." "Well then, what's wrong with it? What are you not telling me? As far as I can see, there is no rising damp, no black mould, no termites, roaches, rats, or horrible neighbours, well, as far as I can see anyway, although the latter I'm not sure about. So if you're not living next door to the axe murderer from hell, what in fact is going on? Unless of course this is a sensitive issue regarding finances, and you can guarantee my discretion in regards to this matter." "Christopher, for goodness sake, just tell her," said his wife suddenly. "Tell her. This girl is a hell of a sharp. We can't pull the wool over her eyes." Christopher looked awkward. He guided Zinnia with his sweeping hand gestures outside the kitchen into the living room and proceeded to pour everyone a tot of whiskey. I don't drink," said Zinnia. "Well, not while I'm on the job anyway. My boss would have kittens if she saw me doing so." "Believe me, you're going to need it," he said. Zinnia gulped down the whisky, not enjoying the taste, as the tart acidity of the drink scratched the back of her throat. She nearly gagged. "Well, I'll tell you the story, shall I?" said the wife. "Well, whether you're going to believe it or not, that is questionable, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But it actually did happen. It was on a Tuesday night a month ago. My little daughter Madeline, who is 7, came running into my bedroom. She was hysterical. She said there was a monster tapping at her bedroom window and making funny faces at her. Naturally, she was absolutely terrified. To even go back into her bedroom, she claimed she wanted to sleep with Mummy and Daddy. Moments later, my other daughter Tammy, who's 8, was seeing the very same thing. At first I thought my daughter was having a bad dream, but with 2 of them claiming to have seen a monster at the window, my concerns were naturally raised. Unless, of course, they were feeding each other nonsensical imaginings, which kids can do. The same thing happened again for 2 consecutive nights. So that was when I decided to investigate their irrational, unfounded claims by going through the motions. I asked them to show Mummy where the monster was. They pointed to the window. I pulled back the curtain. I nearly had a heart attack. There really was a monster on the other side of the window, staring in at us. I mean, that was the last thing I expected to see. And this thing, it was hideous. "Are you sure someone wasn't playing tricks on you? A neighbourhood prank, perhaps," said Zinnia, not knowing how to react to the couple's outrageous, idiosyncratic, preposterous proclamations. "Oh no, this thing was real. Oh, it was. I know exactly what I saw. A monster is an apt description for him. In fact, I don't know what else I'd call him. I know I must sound completely loopy, but I assure you this hideous thing, this grotesque thing was real. I screamed for my husband. He came running, asking me what the heck was going on. Can you believe it? But this brazen-faced, truculent thing was so treacherously audacious, precocious, haughty even. It didn't even run away. It squashed its horrendous, protrusive, ugly face against the window and glared in at us with these malevolent, menacing red eyes. It was like he was smiling vindictively at us in the way the wolf did in the story of Red Riding Hood, with the "I want to eat you" kind of look. It sent shivers down my spine. This thing was hideously grotesque, evil, but it was definitely toying with us like a cat playing with its food, biding its time. It was revelling and taking a great deal of pleasure from our unease. "So did you see it too?" asked Zinnia, addressing Christopher Hoggins directly. "Oh, I saw it all right. I think it wanted us all to see it. The kids were crying and screaming. At first I didn't know how to react, as this thing was so outlandish, so peculiar, so surreal." "What did it look like?" Zinnia asked. "It had the body of a man, obviously much bigger. It was tall, though, possibly about 7 foot. The face of a man, but the muzzle of a wolf or dog, with sharp rows of canine teeth that he kept exposing to us, as if trying to intimidate us. It worked. It really worked. We both were so freaked out. We actually wet our pants." "Did you call the sheriff?" "Absolutely not. I'm a highly regarded solicitor," said Christopher. "I can't afford my reputation to be trampled in the mud, lest I should be made a laughing-stock. My reputation and credibility are everything to me. If it's undermined in any way, my business will go shooting down the drainpipe, along with any potential clients, and that I can assure you of." "Did you go after the creature?" asked Zinnia. "I did. It fled after I fired a couple of shots at it. The problem is that he was back every night, again and again, tormenting us, knocking on the windows, crashing around on our roof, walking on the tiles, making a god-awful commotion, as well as banging our metal drain pipes, and, worst of all, staring at us through the windows with his bright red eyes. I promise you, he's getting off on scaring us, Bridget. It's like he gets a buzz out of it. He's thoroughly enjoying himself, while the rest of us are living in terror. We are all sleeping in the same bed at night. My children, they're not coping. They're both staying with their grandmother in Olympia. We can't continue like this. The creature will not leave us alone. I try to go after it, but it's as elusive as the Scarlet Pimpernel. I fire shots at it, and then it stealthily escapes. We can't live like this in a perpetual state of horror. It's only a matter of time before the activity escalates to something infinitely more grisly. And I assure you, it's only a matter of time." "Which is why you want to sell, so that somebody else inherits your pestering problem." We want to sell because we don't feel safe in our home anymore. It's as simple as that. I've tried to kill the creature. I rarely have. I can't. What am I supposed to do? I'm worried about my children, about their welfare. I have to put security first when it comes to my family. Fair enough. I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate that you want your family's safety above everything else, and that makes sense to me. But I'm going to be straight with you. We're going to put your property on the market and have an open day as you wish. But I'm going to tell the buyer about why you are selling. Of course, they may find your story preposterous, so if they buy your house, it'll be on their own backs. But then my conscience is personally clear. It wouldn't be ethical to warn them. We have to tell them the truth. So you don't think we're crazy? Asked Christopher. I think you're crazy to sell your beautiful home. But if you feel your family's in danger, then you're doing what you feel you need to do, and you need to follow your gut. Zinnia returned to her truck, and she sat there for a while trying to absorb what the couple had told her. They seemed compos mentos. He was a solicitor, for goodness sake. They were a highly intelligent couple. But all this stuff about monsters, well, it was rather ridiculous, ludicrous, deranged and off the wall, surely. Still, she would do what she needed to do, and no matter how silly she looked, she would warn any potential clients about the menacing hazard of an anomalous monster scaring a family out of their home. It had to be told. Zinnia wondered if someone was playing a practical joke on the couple, or someone was nursing a grudge. Maybe a client who got a bad deal from a divorce settlement wanted to scare the living daylights out of the family in the form of some kind of insidious revenge. This case was exceedingly bizarre. But she was certain of one thing. The couple did seem to be genuinely afraid. As Zinnia had expected, a sale from the property was immediate, and the offers had come flying in like hordes of confetti dropping from the sky. She hadn't expected anything less. After all, it was a gorgeous property, in a sought-after location that she knew would be snapped up at once. She wasn't wrong. The couple who did purchase the property had been well informed about the reason the previous owners were selling. She had remembered their astonished reactions, as if they found the idea of the family being hounded by a monster utterly ridiculous. "They told you this," said the woman, looking aghast, "that they were selling because of a monster that had been terrorizing them." "That's right. Look, I'm just an estate agent," Zinnia assured them. "I want to find out why they were selling. This is what they told me. It's up to you to decide whether you still want to buy the property based on what I've told you. It's all in your hands now." "Hell yes, we want to buy it," said the man. "An anomalous monster is hardly going to scare us off. Why, the idea is completely ludicrous." Sandra's account, the new homeowner. "I couldn't believe that me and my husband Paddy, along with our 2 5-year-old twins, Oliver and Jamie, had moved into this phenomenal, resplendent home that was like a dream come true. I mean, that premier kitchen, it just blew my mind away, fitted with the most incredible restaurant-quality technology, with an orange-red Aga imported directly from Britain, along with these fabulous range ovens with gas hobs. Then there was the personalised, exclusive white-painted cabinetry, much fronted with glass, a breadboard, ceiling along with a buffet-ready island fitted with very extravagant granite countertops. The rest of the house was superb, very luxurious, with no expense remotely spared. It would seem that the frantic sellers had snatched up our offer eagerly, as if they couldn't move away fast enough from what had ostensibly been their dream home, that had come crashing down on their faces like a smashed piece of china crockery. It was sad, really. We were benefiting from their misfortune. By all intents and purposes, according to Zinnia, the estate agent, they were a professional couple, highly regarded by the community. So their desire to leave the property based on a monster who had hounded their home seemed a little incredulous. I was a hardened cynic about stuff like this. Even ghostly paranormal phenomena carried no weight with me whatsoever. Although, had we been told by the estate agent that the house was haunted, we might have been a lot more reluctant to sign on the dotted line. I was still pinching myself to have acquired a top-notch house like this that should have cost us a lot more, but the previous owners wanted to cut their losses and just run. It did leave me with a slight malaise and a restless void, but I refused to allow that to cloud my judgment, as I was excited about our bright future, living in such an exquisite part of the world, a prime location. My husband Paddy had been a lot more restrained about our impulsive purchase, worrying that maybe we jumped into the deep end too soon, before we could swim. But I quickly brought him to his senses, assuring him that there was no such thing as monsters, and whatever had been troubling the couple had to have been something else. "Of course I know that, sweetheart, but I believe the couple that lived here didn't just sell up and leave for no good reason at all. Something scared the bejesus out of them. Let's not kid. Whatever it is, I hope it doesn't come back to bite us. That's all I'm saying." I'm glad to say my husband and I became comfortably assured that the previous owners of our property may have just seen a bear, or someone had been playing an obscene, hideous trick on them. I really did like Zinnia's suggestion that a piqued, chagrined ex-client of the solicitors on the receiving end of a nasty divorce settlement, upon which he felt aggrieved, had decided to retaliate by scaring the family rigid, by dressing up in a malicious, realistic disguise to extract his ultimate revenge. That made a lot more sense to me. The twins were loving the brand new home, but I had to change the decor in the bedrooms, as both rooms were done in pretty girlish pinks, and I had 2 boys, so it was a prerequisite for me to change the decor to blue. By all accounts, I was an average, mediocre cook, but with a sensational kitchen like mine, it demanded that I enrolled in a cookery course to improve my culinary prowess, to sharpen my skills as a bona fide chef. A month after having settled into our new home, after a pleasurable evening on the Italian cookery course, where I'd been learning the art of making fluffy potato gnocchi. Who knew it would be so easy? And to think I'd been buying it all these years in those nasty, tight cellophane containers made me shudder. When all you needed to do was to bake a few potatoes, throwing a few casual ingredients together, like Parmesan cheese, parsley, eggs and flour, and voila, you had the most sensational gnocchi. I was learning on my course that simplicity, fabulously fresh ingredients, were the true art of good, fine Italian cuisine. I was musing over this with my takeaway bags on the opposite seat to mine on the truck that I was driving that evening back home, the scant remnants of what I'd made. I knew once my husband had a taste of this black truffle gnocchi, he would be in heaven. He was already complaining about the cost to his waistline of my newly acquired culinary talents. "Perhaps it is better if you remain an average, mediocre cook, because if you continue to cook this outstanding way, I might not be able to squeeze my way out of the front door," he had joked to me. "I was 175 pounds when I moved in here. Now I'm 190, and I hold you responsible. After your cooking went skyrocketing from a C- to an A+. We had laughed, giggled together, enjoying a glass of Prosecco as we clinked glasses together while appreciating our twinkling bright new home that sparkled and gleamed with the promises of hopes for the future. It was very quiet on the long, lonely drive home. I could see a few lights in some of the local houses, but at 10 in the evening those lights were much more scant. It was a velvety black night with a cool breeze blowing in the air. It had been a little nippy when I'd left the cookery course. In truth, I hated driving at night, but it was worth the effort as my cooking had come on in leaps and bounds. Even the Italian chef, Pier Montinaro, had commented that I was a natural cook, and coming from an Italian master chef himself, well, that was a big compliment. I puffed myself up like a self-indulgent, egotistical penguin as I drove down the long ribbon of asphalt towards my home. I'd been out during the evening 3 nights a week, but on this particular occasion something seemed different. The tall oak trees that graced the sides of the street seemed denser, more foreboding, and quite frankly, more than a little doleful, like sultry giants swaggering in the wind, as though slightly intoxicated. But it was the way the shadows danced through the trees that disturbed me the most. It was the ideal outer-worldly ambience for you to see a ghost floating through the trees, if you believed in that sort of thing, of course. I didn't, but on this occasion I felt something was seriously off. I finally drove up the little driveway towards the 2 garages. I could see all the lights were off in the house apart from a flickering light that was left on in the television room, where my husband was possibly watching a movie, as he was waiting for me to return home from my cookery course, possibly drinking back a couple of Gatorades and eating some salted popcorn while he waited. I imagine he'd already bathed the twins, tucked them into bed, read them a bedtime story. I decided to park my truck outside the garage this evening, as the garage door, though brand new, made a god-awful squawking sound that could potentially wake up the entire household. As I parked my truck, I closed the door behind me, walking over to the passenger side of the door to extract the packages of leftovers from the cookery class that were now on the seat. All of a sudden I could feel a discernible presence behind me, which I thought had to be my husband. After all, who else could it be? How nice of him, I thought. He'd come out to welcome me back after hearing my truck in the driveway. "Look what I've got for you," I said, turning around, lifting up the package in my hand. But the figure standing only a few feet away from me was not my husband. It was, and I say it was, a monster. The creature was 7 foot tall, covered in dark matted hair with a human-like face and a dog-like muzzle. It was the most grotesque, hideously evil thing that I've ever seen in my entire life, with hands like a human's, but heavily taloned with dog-like claws, only these were sharp and jagged, and could have torn a man limb from limb into shreds. The creature glared at me through these malevolent, evil-looking red eyes. Smoke seemed to emanate from his nostrils. He growled at me, a vicious, malevolent, evil growl. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and the creature bolted away, grabbing my food parcels in my hand. My husband came bolting out of the house, his eyes wide with terror. "I thought someone was being murdered. What the heck is going on?" I began to tremble violently, pointing hopelessly in the direction of where the creature had gone. My arms jiggling with nervousness, my throat clouded up, as if there was a golf ball in the back of my mouth. I've seen a monster! It's real! It was here! It was growling at me! I thought it was going to kill me!" My husband's face grew ashen and grave. He knew I was the least inclined person to make up something like this. The following week I was too skittish to go to any more cooking classes. I was terrified of returning home to face that monstrous thing again, for there is no telling what a creature like that is capable of. If I had not scared him off with my ear-piercing screams, well, I dread to think. I was beginning to wonder about the safety of my family members, and could totally understand why the previous owners had sold. If I had any comprehension of what this thing had been like, I would never have bought the house myself, never in a million years. One night as we were fast asleep in our beds, we awoke to hear shuffling footsteps on our roof. There was a clanging, banging, crashing sound that put the fear of God into every fibre of my being. I knew in my gut that the monstrous creature was back. "It's out there!" I cried in terror, as anguished tears poured down my face. "Oh my God! It's out there! What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" My 2 twins came rushing into the bedroom, their faces brimming over with tears, as they clutched their teddy bears tightly. "Mummy! Daddy! I'm scared! There's a monster out there! He was looking in at us in the window!" My husband grabbed his rifle, ventured boldly out of doors, with me tagging behind him, telling my kids to stay in the house, that Mummy wanted to see something. What we witnessed that night is of what the most horrendous nightmares are made of. On our roof were 2 nimble, agile-looking, Herculean-sized towering creatures, although one completely dwarfed the other in size and width and girth and weight. They were fighting each other viciously, with a fierce anger that stung the atmosphere. They were lashing out at each other with brazen-fisted punches, hectic lethal lashes, using the timber poles they were carrying in their hands. There were growls, snorts, grunts, hisses, and very alarming roars that made my knees buckle beneath me like wobbling kitchen chairs. At first I thought I was seeing 2 of these things, but then I realized that one of these creatures was distinctly different to the other. This idiosyncratic, anomalous creature was much, much bigger than the other one with the dog-like muzzle. This one was built like a giant human being, easily over 9 foot tall, covered in a plethora of dark hair, with a distinctive gable-shaped head that was slung low on the shoulders, a human-looking face with a prominent furrowed forehead, high cheekbones, and deep-set dark eyes. Now I know it was a Bigfoot. Back then I had no clue what this thing was. The other creature, the one that looked to be half man and half dog, possessed a very distinguished black tail, with a white line of hairs down the central column, that to date I don't think I've ever seen on a dog's tail. I noticed that the tail very much twitched as the creature fought. The creatures were agile, seamless in their movements, but the Bigfoot creature was much larger, more impressive in size than the dog-like humanoid. I will say that if ever in my life I have seen hatred close up and personal, never more so than expressed on my roof that night, as under a cluster of silvery stars and a crescent luminescent moon, the creatures continued to fight, hitting the timber poles at each other, their nostrils flaring, their eyes bright balls of red fire, their mouths open to display their teeth in an intimidating defiance. I assure you, had you yourself had a bird's-eye view on this occasion of those 2 creatures, you would almost certainly say that those 2 creatures were fighting to the death. There was not even a fleeting doubt in my mind about this. My husband began cocking his rifle, showering the air with bullets, designed to scare both the creatures off, to get them off our roof, whatever in God's name they were. The creatures looked down at my husband, while the Bigfoot-like creature used the momentary power of distraction to lunge towards the dog-like humanoid, throwing him off the roof with one push. I promise you he went somersaulting down the roof, landing directly on his cushioned feet, as if nothing had happened. He landed on the grassy turf with the grace of a domestic tabby. It snarled up at the Bigfoot with an enraged expression upon its face, and roared. In a trice the Bigfoot was off the roof, chasing the dog-like creature through the backyard to the wooded area. I was terrified, clutching my husband tightly, cursing the very day we'd laid eyes on this cursed home. As much like the previous homeowner, I wanted out. My husband prepared me a tot of brandy. We went to bed that night with thoughts of putting our house on the market looming to the front of our mind. We couldn't live here with things like that loitering around in our backyard. How would we ever feel safe again? It was like living in Jurassic Park. I was fast asleep when my husband awoke me up in the early hours the following morning. I was annoyed. He was exhilarated. "You won't believe what happened," he said, his eyes round with excitement. "I don't think we have to sell our house after all. I think the hideous thing that has been hounding us is dead." I trembled on my words. "How do you even know that?" I asked. "This," he said, thrusting the dog-like humanoid's decapitated tail with the white central panel into my hand. I shrieked, looking at the tail in aghast. "Where did you get that?" I heard a rapping at the door. I went to answer it, opening the door very slightly. Obviously I was nervous, given what happened last night. But who should be standing there in the doorway but the very creature that looked like a hairy man on our roof? And through the small opening of the door, he handed me the tail. I promise you, sweetheart, as God is my witness, I looked into his eyes. Oh, they were kind eyes. I heard the words in my head. "It's been taken care of. You're all right." "What?" I asked, sitting up in shock. "Are you kidding me?" "No, I'm not," said my husband, positively gleaming. Suffice to say, we never had any more visits from what I perceive must have been a very aggressive dogman. As for the Bigfoot, I feel assured knowing he's out there, watching over us, keeping our neighbourhood free of those dog-like humanoids. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.